Power rankings roll on right here at the Voice of College Football. We appreciate you stopping by for the best in discussion, debate, and analysis. Is the SEC still the best conference in college football? We answered that question very soon. Be looking out for that video with our conference rankings. For now, it's power rankings with a 16-team SEC for the first time, of course. And we start with Mississippi State, usually much higher in the power rankings. This is the worst Mississippi State team since 2002, 2003, when they finished 2-10 and were winless in the SEC. The first time that's happened in over 20 years. New head coach Jeff Lebby has a bit of a honeymoon period, but he's going to have to ramp it up in 2025. The defense, usually a proud component to the Bulldogs, number 126 in the nation. So the cowbells were needed and used to try to drown out the opposing team's fight song after all those touchdowns. At number 16 in the SEC, Hail State. Mark Stoops boldly stated at SEC Media Days that despite the success of Kentucky football, which has been unprecedented in recent decades, that he was proud of the accomplishments, but raising Kentucky to a 7-8 win status on a regular basis was, quote, not good enough. Well, this certainly wasn't good enough, because after Kentucky's plateaued after a couple 10-3 finishes in recent years to 7-6, 7-6 the last 2 years, 2023 and 2022, 4-8, 1-7 in the SEC. They got off to a decent start. Consider through 5 games, they were 3-2. They had taken Georgia to a 1-point loss, and they beat Ole Miss. This Kentucky offense failed to score more than 20 points in any SEC game. They really need to bounce back, or Mark Stoops could be on the hot seat, even though at one point they were contemplating a statue in front of Commonwealth Stadium. At number 15 in the SEC, UK. Auburn's record was no better in Hugh Freeze's second season on the Plains at 5-7, but maybe his offensive genius is starting to take hold. One of the worst 5 passing offenses in college football in 2023, elevated to number 28 in passing yardage and number 17 in terms of pass efficiency, but still 5-7. Why? Well, the defense regressed, and also the turnover rate was deplorable. Number 120 in the nation in turnover margin. This team lost to Cal, who couldn't beat anybody but Florida State in the ACC. Much to get done there on the Plains, and Hugh Freeze being paid a ton of money to get it done, but it did not get done in 2024. At number 14 in the SEC, War Eagle. Most of us around college football were fascinated to finally find out how the 2 new entries would fare in the mighty SEC. Texas, thumbs up. Oklahoma, not so much, of course. At 2-6, the offense was horrific, because the offense was horrific, but also because of the injuries. At one point, 5 wide receivers down, and we're not talking about late in the season. We're talking about through 3 or 4 games throughout the rest of the season. Their top 5 wide receivers out. I've never seen anything like it. 2 offensive linemen out early in the season, injuries up front. Jackson Arnold did not develop into the quarterback expected. He was benched about midseason, came back late in the season, and played a little bit better. And Oklahoma had that one nice effort against Alabama, 24-3. But besides that, it was ugly often. Number 113 in total offense, number 119 in passing offense, number 119 in passing offense, 19 in total defense. The defense, after years and years of living off passing and scoring, and the defense being marginal, Brent Venables has fortified the defense, but he needs to find a quarterback, which he did from Washington State for 2025. But for 2024, it was Oklahoma looking bad at 6-7. And number 13 in our SEC Power Rankings, Boomer. While we were noting bold statements at SEC Media Days, we go back a previous summer to 2023. Clark Lee said that Vanderbilt would become a great football program. Okay, it's still not there, but we get it, Clark. And you somewhat accomplished it in 2024 to all of our amazement. Consider what Vandy accomplished in finishing 7-6. They beat two decent quality ACC teams in Georgia Tech in the bowl game and Virginia Tech to get their season going in week one. Of course, the historic win against Alabama, the first one over the Tide since 1984. Even in their losses, consider that Vanderbilt had one-score losses against Texas, LSU, and Missouri in overtime. Clark Lee, you're running a fine football program at Vandy, number 12 in the SEC. 7-6 overall, 3-5 in the SEC. Looks remarkable at Vanderbilt. It looks mediocre at Arkansas. Sam Pittman appears to still have a job. Of course, he does going into 2025. 3-0 in bowl games as Arkansas avoided having a losing season back-to-back years. But is there a future at Arkansas with Sam Pittman? On their best night at home with a raucous crowd backing them, a nice win against a top 10 Tennessee team. Their worst showing of the year, it didn't appear so at the time because they were an underdog on the road in Stillwater against Oklahoma State, but the Cowboys proved to be awful at 0-9 in the Big 12. At number 11 in our SEC Power Rankings, Pig Suey! The upset of the year in college football, don't look to any particular game. Look to Gainesville, Florida. Billy Napier still has a job, and things are looking up at Florida. What were the projections? As low as 2-10, 4-8, 5-7. That looked like the ceiling. Maybe with a lot of luck, 7-5. Well, with a little luck from some opponents that were down, Florida State, more so than we expected, Florida finished 8-5 with a bowl victory. And they've got their quarterback, DJ Lagway, and they got him precious experience in this season in favor of Graham Mertz. Now it's DJ Lagway, not with no experience going into 2025, but valuable playing time. Wow, this turned out about as well as it possibly could for Florida football. 8-5, 4 up, 4 down in the SEC. And remember that gauntlet that was unheard of, that 5-game gauntlet against all preseason top 10 teams? Florida went 3-2 in those games. At number 10 in the SEC, but in terms of a rating on a curve, number 1 in the SEC. Gators, despite having a worse record than Barry Odom at the same point in his Missouri career, entering 2023, the administration stuck with Eli Drinkwitz, and so glad that it did. 11-2, followed up by 10-3 to confirm the work he's done on the recruiting path and in building a program. Missouri, yes, 10-3 with a bowl victory against Iowa. Had a fine season, despite some ugly losses, blown out, annihilated by Alabama and Texas A&M, but consider some injuries that compromised Brady Cook, and then also their fine running back Nate Noel. This team defeated 4 teams with winning records, and yes, they didn't much impress at times during 2024, but what was impressive was taking South Carolina down to the wire the final 15 seconds, and some of their wins against teams that turned out to be really strong football teams, like Vanderbilt. At number 9 in our SEC Power Rankings, Mizzou. Now that we're into the offseason, it's difficult to fathom that a team that finished 8-5 had a clear shot to go to the SEC championship game going into the final weekend of the season. But that was the situation facing Texas A&M. But they could not get it done at home against Texas. They fell in that game and, of course, moved on to a bowl game in which they fell to USC. It ended badly for Texas A&M with 3 consecutive losses. They lost on the Plains to Auburn, upset in that one, but still had a shot to get to Atlanta and get to a college football playoff. So Mike Elko's first season, success? Well, in terms of opportunity, yes, it looked like it. With wins early in the season against the likes of LSU, they put themselves in position, but again, they faltered down the stretch. They have found their quarterback for 2025 in Marcel Reed. Connor Weigman is off to Houston. At number 8 in our SEC Power Rankings, Gig 'em! We didn't think anything could look worse than Brian Kelly trying to fit in as a Cajun when he took the LSU job with that fake accent. But you know what looks worse? Notre Dame going to the national championship game. Brian Kelly, with just a few weeks left in the season, consider this. 6-1 with a 2-score lead against Texas A&M to take control of a clear path to the SEC championship game, having already notched impressive wins against South Carolina and against Ole Miss. but it all came crashing down with losses against Texas A&M, blowing that lead on the road, getting annihilated by 4 scores against Alabama, and of course losing to what appeared at the time to be a hapless Florida team. It's not a good look for Brian Kelly. No, it's not falling apart, but 10-4, 10-3, 9-4, not seriously competing for championships in the SEC, where he said he would be able to do it because he would not be brought down by that barrier in terms of Notre Dame recruiting. He would have all that talent available to him in Baton Rouge, but he's not getting the job done. But still, and now getting lost kind of in that sea of second and third tier SEC teams. Yes, at number 7 in the SEC, Bayou Bengals. The controversy of college football playoff selections centered around Alabama late in the season, but the Tide did not get the upsets outside the conference that it needed to get the push to the 12 seed. So they finished 9-3. They go to a bowl game. They lose to an undermanned Michigan team, and it ended quite embarrassingly for Kalen DeBoer. It's not necessarily the best setup when you're replacing not just a legend, but arguably the greatest coach of all time in Nick Saban. Keep in mind, Nick Saban went 7-6 his first year in Tuscaloosa, but of course Nick Saban was not handed a Nick Saban program. Kalen DeBoer was. Capable coach. I believe he will succeed at Alabama. Not to Nick Saban standards. No way. This team had 4 quality wins, but 2 horrendous losses that are just about unforgivable to Vanderbilt, and then the 3-touchdown blowout at Oklahoma. At number 6 in our SEC Power Rankings, Roll Tide. Nobody wanted to see this team in the college football playoff, meaning the teams that played in the college football playoff did not want to see them. But I think a lot of fan bases across America thought, man, love to see that South Carolina team mix it up in the playoffs and see what they could accomplish, because when they were at their best, ask Texas A&M in the fourth quarter and some others, they were strong. South Carolina, they did lose to Illinois in a bowl game, but they've got their quarterback all set up coming off they did lose to Illinois in the bowl game, but they've got their quarterback for 2025 after quite a breakout season this fall in Lenoris Sanders. Shane Beamer, not on the hot seat after 5-7 in 2023. South Carolina looks to be in good shape going into next football season after 9-4. At number 5 in the SEC, Gamecocks. Lane Kiffin wants you to believe that Ole Miss belonged in the college football playoffs, and they were 1 play away 3 times, but there is no excuse in losing to Kentucky, a 4-8 football team, and the Rebels could not put all that talent together consistently against everyone. Wow, they handed Georgia the most decided defeat in recent years against that Bulldog program under Kirby Smart. They looked so good on occasion, with Jackson Dart throwing to one of the best wide receiver corps in the country, and that defensive front was amazing, but not consistent enough, losing to teams that they shouldn't. But finishing at number 4 in our SEC Power Rankings, the Rebels. The stink of the Ohio State blowout has kind of marred Tennessee's season to a certain extent. They just look completely hapless in that game, trailing 42-10 in the fourth quarter. But considering they started a redshirt freshman in Nico Iamaleava, who got some playing time, of course, the previous bowl season against Iowa, and showed us that he would be able to take the reins of this football team, and did. Dylan Sampson, a running back, and of course a strong defensive front, weak secondary. Tennessee, a really good football team, but a flawed football team, and that showed up in that matchup in Columbus as it did earlier in Athens against Georgia. Tennessee, strong, established by Josh Heupel. Now they need to take the next step. Not anywhere close to a lead at this point, but it's doable. It's reachable. Number 3 in the SEC, Rocky Top. I wrestled with this final decision between number 1 and number 2 in the SEC. We could go the conventional route and just say flat out, Georgia won the conference. And they also beat Texas twice. Of course, Georgia's number 1. However, that's the objective ranking. But it's a nuanced ranking here at the Voice of College Football, and it's my power ranking. And I believe Texas was the more consistent football team from week to week. And after their performance in the playoffs, going into the playoff, Georgia number 1 in the power rankings in the SEC, Texas 2. But after watching Texas dismantle Clemson, Georgia did as well, of course, 31-3, even more decidedly to start the season. I get that. But tacking on the Clemson win to their resume, Arizona State, that was not impressive. Outplayed by the Sun Devils through much of that game, but playing as well as they did, better than anyone else against that Ohio State team in the national semifinal, coming within 1 yard of tying the game. Texas, when you look at all the components of a football team on both sides of the ball, really had no weaknesses. Georgia, on the other hand, poor wide receiver play. Had the change at quarterback, Carson Beck, hurt in the SEC championship game. Texas should have pulled away in the first half. They had a yardage lead of like 250 to 60, but just kept blowing it in terms of scoring opportunities in the rematch after Georgia blew them out and really were the far better team in Austin. I'm giving the nod to Texas. Again, it's the entire resume, it's the entire season, and I'm going to take that liberty and really factor in the playoff run of Texas over Georgia. Our SEC power rankings look like this. Texas 1, Georgia 2. We've got Tennessee at 3, Ole Miss 4, South Carolina 5, Bama 6, LSU 7, Texas A&M at 8, Missouri at 9. Number 10 is Florida. Number 11, Arkansas. Vandy's at 12, OU at 13, Auburn 14. Number 15 is Kentucky, and at number 16, Hail State. SEC Power Rankings. Leave your comments down below. Get geared up for the Big Ten. And then our rankings of the conferences 1 through 4. Right here at the Voice of College Football.